Welcome back to the Quantum Cave. I'm Mike Longo, and sitting beside me is Mr. Glenn Kwasny.
Hi.
Hey. Some weeks have gone by, and we've been busy in other places, but I wanted to do a little recap on WonderCon.
WonderCon.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We saw a lot of panels, did a lot of things, met a lot of people. But one in particular I wanted to ask you about because he had some sort of influence on you, Mr. Jim Steranko.
Jim Steranko. And so just saying the name, I become a little teenage fanboy again. He was huge in my life. I mean, just when he hit Marvel, it was like a sea change. It was like artwork you had never seen before. This was something special. This was completely different from what anybody else was doing. This was a man who really understood graphic design. You know, he not only knew anatomy and things like that, and foreshortening and all that stuff that everybody else knew and that Jack Kirby was king of and all that, but his graphics, his balance, everything. I mean, the colors he chose, it was just amazing.
Well, that was his background, though. He was already an established graphic artist,
right? And
before he came into the comics,
right. And I used to know this stuff, but you know, you forget things. But seeing him talk on that panel, it was like it brought it all back. And he talked about how he had been working at a graphics place. He was in charge of a graphics department and making good bank, as I think he said, something like that. He was making good money, and so he like took a cut in salary to be able to work in comics, which really impresses me. You know, that he did that. Mm-hmm. That this was something he was passionate about, and then he talked about how he started off at Marvel, and then how he ended at Marvel, and he's a very dramatic man.
Yes,
he's a very dramatic man,
yeah.
And so you kind of have to, just like with Stan Lee. Stan Lee may have never been on the stage, but he is a dramatic person himself.
Yeah,
he's just
a showman.
Yeah, bigger than life and everything. A showman, exactly. Showman. That's the name. And Jim Steranko is his equal, at least. And he actually was on the stage. He had an act that he did as a escape artist, and he was the inspiration for Mr. Miracle, the escape artist superhero in DC Comics. So yeah, so he obviously impressed people and had an effect on people in the business, as well as us out there buying the comics. But yeah, it's like when you say the name, I go right back to seeing that cover on Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And he had a way of doing bodies where they kind of curved and they were slender, and yet they looked okay. You know, I mean, it wasn't like, I don't know how to explain it. He had his own style completely, and it grabbed my attention and held my attention for years. I just, you know, you see his artwork and then you go, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, it really isn't. It really is distinctive, and I was also impressed. But you know, he was a very engaging personality. Anyway,
Right.
But he was always trying something new and always learning. And sometimes he'd be watching something on the cinema and think, yeah, someone's got something there, and he'd try to incorporate it. And didn't always you know, work with the powers that be, but it did have some lasting impact on the style.
Right. Yes. Back in those days, in the '60s especially, you know, it's a business. They want to make money, and so it's just like in the movies. You have a success, something works, so you want to just duplicate that. Yeah. You're not really thinking about, on the business level I'm talking, they're not thinking about something new, cutting edge, breaking new territory, going into someplace nobody's ever been. They're just thinking about making money, you know. And that gets down to the editors, and then the editors share that with the creators, and then you get some conflict, because of course creators are creative. They want to do something different, most of them. People who'd worked in the business a long time sort of knew that there were house styles.
What was the House of Ideas? The
House of Ideas. That was one of Stan's things, just like, you know, his soapbox and all that, and you know, being a Merry Marvel Marching Society and all that stuff. This was one of his taglines, one of the things he used to sell, and you know, but it always makes me smile because quite often, you know, he was on the level as editorial director of Marvel Comics, overseeing everything, he was on that level where he had to interface with the business people, and the business people would say, you got to make money, do this, do this, do this.
Right.
And then so he had enough savvy business-wise to know, like, okay, this is our style, this is what's been successful for us, this is what we want to do. So when artists came in, quite often, because Jack Kirby had been the successful artist, you know, on Fantastic Four, on Avengers, you know, on all their early books, everything that came afterwards, if you look, you'll see. Great artists like Herb Trimp and people. Anyway, great artists would work for Marvel, but you would see that they were doing the Kirby style. You know, they were copying Kirby pretty much as far as
told to.
Yeah, that was it. It's like, do it like Kirby, and that's what when we saw Steranko talking on his panel, and he talked about how he first started there. That's what he got from Stan was you know, oh, your art's great, but you know, here's Jack Kirby, do it like that. You know, which of course for a truly passionate artist like Steranko, that's like a slap in the face. That's like a challenge, you know. It's like, tell me what to do, I'll show you. You know?
Yeah, he obviously did.
He took it as a challenge, you know, to break the mold, and he was successful. He finally managed. At first, you know, he went along with it, and he talked about how he did that. And at first, I mean, he was so passionate about comics. Like I said, he took a cut and paid to work in comics, and he was glad just to be working with Marvel and be able to use these characters. And I mean, he was like us. I mean, if you could work for that company, you'd be thrilled. And he was at first, but then after a while, after he'd done a few stories, and you know, he was doing it in the Kirby style, kind of, you know, and trying to get some of his stuff in, because he, not just the art, also the story. You know, he had a lot of ideas about getting the story more towards a cinematic thing, like the film noir and things like that, the hard-boiled detective, that kind of thing. And you know, so he tried getting that in, but Stan kept trying to rein him in. You know, it's like, this is how we do it. You know, so where am I going with this? Oh, okay. So you know, art-wise and I'm closing my eyes. Art-wise and story-wise, you know, he wanted to do more. Naturally, and his passion and love for comics, he wanted to make comics better. He wanted to push them to the next level. Yeah. You know, whereas the businessmen were happy with staying on this level as long as they made money. So his artwork was popular enough. You know, he went along. They gave him a little more leeway, but he wasn't happy. It was starting to irritate him and bother him on some level. At first, he may not have even been all that aware of it, but you know, eventually he knew what it was, and so he started trying to do it more his way, and he had some fights and battles with Stan that have become pretty famous in the business. But then Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., when he took that book that had been a nothing book, pretty much, I mean, you know, taking Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos and trying to update them by making them the Man from U.N.C.L.E., basically, with the acronym S.H.I.E.L.D., which was pretty, I don't want to say stupid. These were smart men. I mean, they made more money than I ever made. But, you know, it was a silly acronym. I mean, they took the name S.H.I.E.L.D. because it was cool, and then they tried to retro-build into it something that made sense. And it's great that they were aware of that, and that has carried on to this day, because you'll notice, like, in the Marvel movies now, they actually made a joke out of that. You know, when Agent Coulson would show up and go, I'm from S.H.I.E.L.D., and they'd say, oh, what's that stand for? And he was like, we're working on it. You know? It was funny. I mean, it was great for those of us who knew. You know, it's like, yeah, that was never a good acronym, but S.H.I.E.L.D. is cool. So, yeah, so once he got that book, and started doing a little more his style and his stories, and it became very popular, and numbers were going up. Well, you know, then editorially, the top guys are like, it's making money, you know, let him run with it a little bit, you know, and yeah, so he had a great run on that book, but I forget what the final thing was. You were there, Steranko. He talked about, like, his last big fight, where he went in to talk to Stan, and
I don't remember what the fight was exactly about, but that was it, and
yeah, there was,
Jim was fired. He says, you're out of here.
Yeah, and then, of course, if you look at it from his point of view, it was like, I took a stand and said, my way or I'm leaving.
It was something like
that.
Yeah,
so he would say, I gave them a choice and they chose not to go with
Right.
me.
And then I guess a period of 3 months went by, and then Stan gives him a call,
Yeah.
a phone call, and they're just kind of like, Jim. Yes? Jim. It was like,
yes, Stan.
it's like, come back home. And then everything was good again. And what was really cool is we saw a little bit of that while we were getting our artwork signed.
Yeah, later on, we're standing in line at Steranko's table on the dealer floor,
Yeah.
you know, waiting for that personal moment, you know,
Yeah.
which is always great. Yeah, all of a sudden, out of the crowd, you know, I see out of my peripheral vision Stan Lee, you know, with a couple of handlers or bodyguards or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, because, you know, he's
He's
Stan Lee.
He's Stan Lee.
Everybody wants a piece of him, you know. It's,
Yeah.
ah, touch Stan Lee. But you know, he was coming through the crowd, and he went right to Steranko, reached out, shook his hand. They had an exchange, you know, and it was like, see,
There it is.
it all worked out. They're friends. They admire each other. It was equals. You
Yeah.
know, titans of the industry.
Yeah,
you
they're
know?
legends, yeah.
Yeah. Gods Among Us. Well, wait, that's a DC thing now, so they've trademarked that, I think. But
That was a cool moment.
that was such a cool
Yeah.
moment, especially after hearing his panel.
Yeah, it was a
and
good
him
way to
talking
wrap
about
it up, and there
how
it
they
is.
struggled and everything, and that was like such a cool finish, you know. And I got a picture of it, you know, which was cool too with my little camera thing.
You didn't tell me you had a picture of it. We need that for the website.
I thought you had posted it already.
Of
I
them,
uploaded
of them, of them together?
Yeah, I thought I uploaded.
I don't
everything.
think so. We'll have to get on that.
Oh, I got to get my WonderCon pics on the website then.
That's right. We only have a few. We'll put more on. More on. All right.
No, not more.
No,
on.
not more on.
More on.
More on the website. And
Yes.
so maybe we'll get right on that. So thank you very much, Glenn.
You're very welcome. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah. See you next time.
Adios. Where's that adios?
More on.